Hey guys, tonight we arrive in a village where silence has weight, suspicion wears a bonnet, and even your shadow might be evidence. You've just stepped into Salem, Massachusetts in the year 1691, just months before a teenage tantrum snowballs into one of the most bizarre, tragic, and sleep-deprived witch hunts in history. Your shoes are still dusty from the road, your hands cold from gripping the sides of the cart, and your back aches in that dull way that says you're far from home. You stretch as you step down, trying not to show you're new here. But they already know. Of course they know. This town has eyes, the kind that peek through shutters, linger too long in church, and memorize the way your elbows stick out when you kneel. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in front of the minister's house. That's where they told you to start, Reverend Samuel Paris. You were promised work, some chores, maybe a position as a housemaid or a field hand, depending on the household's needs. Nothing glamorous, but reliable. Quiet. You knock. Eventually, someone answers. Not the Reverend. A girl, maybe 12 or 13, with eyes too wide and still like she's watching a fire. Only she can see. She doesn't speak, just nods and lets you in. The Paris house is dim and sparse. Wooden walls, a single table, a fire that's more smoke than warmth. In the corner, a slave woman to tuba, you overheard someone say, stirs something in a pot that smells like herbs, maybe even cloves. Not the Puritan kind of smell, the other kind, the kind that makes people whisper. You're given a corner to sleep in, a blanket, a crust of bread. You lie down and close your eyes, but you don't sleep. Because Salem doesn't sleep. Outside, the wind scrapes across the roof like fingernails, or maybe it's just branches. You tell yourself it's branches. The next morning, you rise early. Everyone does. Before the sun, before the frost can settle too deep in your joints. You sweep. You gather kindling. You help feed the chickens. You say nothing. It's safer that way. At church, the Reverend's sermons stretch on like a punishment. Fire. Damnation. The devil is here. Not out there, not in France or London or the forests, but here, in this town, in someone's home, in someone's daughter. You glance around and realize no one is blinking. Their eyes are wide alert, like they're all playing some terrible game of pretend. You blink once and suddenly feel guilty. After service, the girls gather in a tight circle near the well. The same girl who opened the door last night, Betty, you think is whispering something too low to hear. Then a burst of laughter, then silence. They scatter like birds. Someone bumps your shoulder. Hard. You turn. A woman in gray. Her eyes sharp. Don't look at them, she mutters. They're not for you to know. You mumble an apology. She walks off. You wonder if she'll remember your face tomorrow, or 10 years from now, when the accusations start. Historians still argue whether Salem's soil was literally toxic. That hallucinogenic rye might have sparked the whole frenzy. Others say it was mass hysteria, unresolved trauma, or even just teenage boredom. You're living it now, and honestly, it feels like everything is slightly wrong. Even the sunlight, even the birdsong, even the bread. You try not to stare at anyone for too long, because eye contact here is more dangerous than fire. At dinner that night, Reverend Paris talks about wolves in sheep's clothing, about temptation, about the serpent that walks upright. No one chews. Even the sound of bread tearing feels loud. You nod. When he nods, you bow your head. When he prays, you don't dare speak unless spoken to. Outside, the trees sway in patterns that don't quite match the wind. You wonder how long it'll take before someone notices your left-handedness, or the scar on your ankle, or the birthmark on your wrist. You begin to plan how to hide each one, just in case. Just in case they notice. Because if they do, they'll whisper. And if they whisper, you might not survive. You wake the next morning to the scrape of a wooden spoon against the bottom of an empty pot. It's not even fully light yet. Just that thin veil of early dawn that paints everything in pewter. The house creaks as people begin to move slowly, quietly, like they're trying not to wake a spirit that hasn't yet decided whether to curse or bless the day. You sit up and notice the girl again. Betty, kneeling in front of the hearth, her lips moving silently. Not in prayer, you realize. Something else. Her hands twitch slightly. Then she blinks, turns, and sees you watching. You look away immediately, but too late. She saw you. Her expression doesn't change. Just stillness. You start your day with water hauling your shoulders, already sore from yesterday's wood splitting. Every bucket you carry sloshes against your boots. The cold seeps in and doesn't leave. The frost in Salem doesn't just coat the grass, it finds its way into your knuckles and bones, and it lingers. You make the mistake of smiling at a man near the well. He doesn't smile back. Instead, he adjusts his hat, mutters something about strangers, and walks off. People here don't smile. Not unless they're hiding something. Not unless they've already made up their mind about you. You pass a house with a broken shutter. A woman peers through the gap and doesn't blink when you wave. She simply closes the curtain. This place watches and watches and watches. At the meeting house, later, you help tidy the pews, polishing with scraps of old cloth and ash. It's mindless work, but it keeps you inside and warm. As you rub a stubborn mark from the wooden bench, a voice startles you from behind. You're the one who came from Marblehead. You turn. A young man not much older than you. Soft face, clear eyes, cautious voice. You nod. My name's Ezra, he says. My cousin said you helped at Widow Burton's place. You nod again. You're not sure if this is kindness or a trap. He doesn't press, just nods back and begins sweeping the far side of the hall. But you can feel him watching you, curious, not hostile, which makes him one of the friendlier people you've met. You wonder if that makes him more dangerous. By the time the sun starts setting, the sky turns orange with ash-colored clouds. A few snowflakes spiral lazily through the village like lost feathers. Back at the house, Tituba offers you a cup of something hot. You hesitate, then take it. It smells of bark and citrus, bitter and strange. You sip. It warms you all the way down. Helps the nerves, she murmurs, not looking at you. You nod, say thank you. She smiles faintly. Her eyes are tired, too tired for someone her age, too tired for someone who sees what you see, how the walls close in on people like her, and maybe people like you. The Reverend returns from council just before supper, his boots caked in mud, his face drawn like taut rope. He slams the door behind him and mutters something about blasphemy. At the table he tells the story. Ann Putnam's child has been struck dumb, frothing, eyes rolled back. The child says Goody Osborne's spirit beat her in the night, gasps all around. Tituba stills her hands. Betty says nothing, just stares at the wall. You blink. This is the third child in 2 weeks to fall ill, and each time someone new is blamed. First the washerwoman, then the midwife, now Osborne. You've heard whispers how the girls cry out in court, claiming to see specters of townsfolk pinching and stabbing them. The strangest thing, people believe them. You almost laugh when Reverend Paris says, we must prepare for more signs, but no one else does. So you swallow your reaction like spoiled broth. Later, as you're folding rags by the fire, Betty begins humming again, a low, disjointed tune. It doesn't match any hymn you've heard. It loops and stutters like a child's game gone wrong. You glance at her. She meets your gaze and smiles just barely. You don't sleep well. That night your dreams are full of heavy doors and invisible hands gripping your wrists. You wake to a new sound. Horses. Many. The village green is crowded. Men on horseback. Magistrates. Scribbling on parchment. Looking serious. Looking afraid. You step out to see. Ann Putnam is there, surrounded by a throng of people. Her daughter lies limp in her arms, but her eyes are open, rolling, twitching. She named them. Someone yells. Gasps ripple through the crowd like wind through wheat. Goody Osborne. Goody good. Tituba. Yes, Tituba. You spin. Back at the house, she's still inside. You run. Inside, she's stirring a pot. They named you, you blurt. She doesn't react, not right away. Then I know. She continues stirring. Her face is calm. You don't understand. You should leave, you say. Run. She finally looks up. To go where? And you realize she's right. There's nowhere. Not when your skin is brown. Not when the Reverend owns your name. That afternoon the magistrates come. Tituba is arrested. The Reverend doesn't stop them. Betty doesn't look up from her sewing. Your hands are trembling. Ezra finds you by the well after sundown. You all right, he asks. You nod. He says, they say she confessed. What she said the devil came to her. Said she saw a book with 9 names. You blink. She confessed. He shrugs. Maybe to save herself. Maybe because she had to. Maybe because she's clever. Historians still argue whether Tituba was coerced, threatened, or simply strategic. Some say she invented stories to entertain the girls before the madness began. Others think she merely echoed what she heard, echoed it so well that it stuck. All you know is this: her confession changed everything, because now the trials will begin, and the list will grow, and people will start choosing sides, not good or evil, but safe or accused. Ezra says nothing more, just looks at you, then walks away. You stand there, feeling the snow land softly on your sleeve. You wonder how long until someone accuses you. You wonder if you'd confess too, just to survive. You spend the next morning chopping firewood with trembling arms. The axe bites into the logs with satisfying thunks, but your rhythm falters every few strikes. Your mind drifts. You see Tituba's face, not fearful, not pleading, but eerily still. You remember how she didn't run, how she stirred the pot, knowing she was being named. And now she's gone. The village moves on as if it hasn't noticed. But you can tell everything is shifting beneath the surface like ice, groaning just before it cracks. People talk in lowered voices. They avoid the center of the road. Doors close faster. Greetings become nods. The cold gets sharper. At breakfast, Reverend Paris doesn't speak. He reads scripture aloud, as if daring someone to interrupt. Betty stares at her spoon. Her hand twitches slightly as though conducting a silent orchestra only she can hear. You volunteer to take the scraps to the hog pen, just to escape the house. The fresh air doesn't help. Neither does the distance. You hear it anyway. Screaming, high-pitched, from somewhere near the Putnam house. You don't run. You walk slowly, cautiously, pretending you don't care, like you're just another passerby. But you veer closer than necessary. You're not the only one. A small crowd has gathered near the meeting house. Inside, one of the afflicted girls, Mercy Lewis, writhes on the floor. Her limbs jerk and spasm. She sobs and then laughs, sharp and bitter. She's cursed. Someone whispers, bitten by a specter in her sleep. She said she saw Goody Corey's face hovering over her in the dark. You recognize the name. Martha Corey, respected, older, one of the more devout members of the church. Even she's not safe now. A man nearby mutters, even the righteous can be used by the devil. You step back. Your stomach tightens. That afternoon, Ezra finds you again. He speaks low, so no one hears. They'll be calling for more soon. You feel it. You nod. He glances around, then says, "My aunt's already sending her daughter to Boston. She says it's safer." "Should I go?" you ask. He studies your face. "I don't know. he says finally. Can you? You can't. Not yet. No money. No letter of reference. No one to vouch for you. You're barely more than a shadow in this town. Back at the house, Reverend Parris is at his desk, scribbling furiously. His face is red. His lips move silently. Betty sits still in the corner, arms folded tightly across her chest. She watches you walk in, and her eyes follow you as you cross the room, like she's memorizing you, measuring. You sweep. You avoid her gaze. That night, the wind howls, loud enough to rattle the shutters. You wake to voices outside. You peek through the gap in the window. Torches. People gathered in front of the jailhouse. A man is speaking loud, frantic. They're among us. The devil walks in daylight. He speaks through them, feeds on our weakness, cheers, amens. Then a girl steps forward. You recognize her. Abigail Williams. She begins to convulse. The crowd gasps. She shrieks and points her. She's behind me. She turns, spins, screams again. People shout, grab at her, pray over her. And then she says another name. Goody Nurse. Rebecca Nurse. 71. Kind. Known for her healing hands and gentle ways. People freeze. You feel the whole town pause collectively, forgetting how to breathe. Even her, someone says, voice cracking. Even her, another replies grimly. The wind roars. The fire crackles. The jail door creaks open. You shut the curtain and lie back down. But sleep does not come. Historians still debate why the girls behaved as they did. Was it trauma, performance, revenge for the strict social codes placed upon them? Or did they believe their own stories? Some say they were hungry for attention in a world that silenced them. Others believe they were simply pawns in a power game they barely understood. Either way, their words had weight. And that weight crushes. The next day, word spreads fast. Goody Nurse has been arrested. The town splits like a rotten log. Half say it must be true, no one's safe. The other half whisper that it's gone too far. But the second group whispers too quietly. And the first group is very, very loud. You visit the well again. Ezra's already there. They're building more holding cells, he says. Why, you ask? He laughs, not kindly, because they're not running out of names. He's holding a list. You see scribbles, half legible. Names you recognize, names you don't. He folds it, slips it into his coat. They're collecting more, he says, just in case. In case of what? He doesn't answer. You don't ask again. The fields are quiet that afternoon. Too quiet. Even the livestock seems to sense the unease. You return to your chores, head down, hands busy. You scrub the hearth until your knuckles bleed. Betty watches. You feel it again, that sinking dread, like someone's written your name already. You just haven't heard it yet. The town has become a stage, and everyone's performing. You walk through the market and see it in the way people speak now, too carefully, too politely. Greetings are wrapped in layers of subtext. Even a simple good day sounds like a warning or a test. Everyone knows that one misplaced word can hang in the air like smoke. And smoke, you're starting to realize, leads to fire. That morning, Ezra finds you by the dry goods stall. He doesn't speak right away, just nods and hands you a piece of paper. You unfold it. It's another list, 23 names. This came from the council meeting, he says. They're preparing indictments. You scan the list, 2 names you know. One is a girl who sang at the church gathering last week. The other is a baker whose bread always tastes of honey. You hand the paper back. Why are you showing me this? Ezra shrugs. You're smart. You're watching. Like me. You want to laugh. Watching, you feel like you're sinking, like every hour is just an exercise in survival, keeping your face neutral, your hands busy, your thoughts unreadable. But maybe that is smart. Maybe that's the only way to make it through. That evening, there's another gathering at the meeting house. You don't go, but you hear the chanting from a distance, echoing through the still trees like a rising tide. Later, someone says a man confessed. John Proctor. That name hits different. A farmer, respected but critical. He once publicly doubted the girls, said they were pretending, and now he's in jail. You hear that he only confessed under torture, but that part's whispered, and no one wants to whisper too loudly anymore. You spend the next morning helping repair the fence along the parsonage. Ezra joins you. You both work in silence at first, hammering in crooked nails and straightening beams that don't want to stay put. Then he says, you know they'll come for more. It's not stopping. You pause. When do you think it ends? He doesn't answer right away. Then, when they run out of people, or when someone more powerful than the judges says enough, you glance at him. Or when everyone's dead, he adds too casually. You both chuckle, but it's the hollow kind, the kind that's half-truth. By midday, you see another girl fall into convulsions on the church lawn. She screams about rats, that the devil sent rats into her mouth during the night. She even pulls a small, ragged tooth from her apron pocket. People believe her. The girl is 12. She says Goody Bishop did it. That's 4 more accusations today. Historians still argue whether some of the girls were trained to act or if they were feeding off each other's hysteria. One theory suggests that their symptoms were performative, evolving through attention and reinforcement. Each new outburst had to top the last, be more vivid, more grotesque, more believable. It feels like theater, except the consequences are fatal. The next morning, the stocks are full again. You see the baker, the one who gave you a crust of warm bread the week you arrived. She's pale. Her hands shake. Someone's smeared ash on her face, a mark of shame. She doesn't cry. She just stares straight ahead. You wonder what she said, what gesture she made, which part of her past was misinterpreted or invented. The days grow colder, the air more brittle. Your breath fogs in the morning light like a ghost trying to escape. Betty hasn't spoken in 2 days, not a word, but she smiles now. That's the strange part. Little smirks, when someone walks past, a twitch in the corner of her mouth when names are mentioned. And one night, as you scrub the floors, she speaks. To you. You talk in your sleep, she says. Your heart skips. You keep scrubbing. I don't. You do, she insists. You said, Mama, last night. Then you said, don't touch me. Your hands slow. She tilts her head. Who are you talking to? You don't answer. She stands and walks off, still watching you, like a cat watching something twitch under a leaf. You sleep badly again. Every sound becomes a sentence. Every whisper, a verdict. The next afternoon, the Reverend pulls you aside. His eyes are sunken, his skin blotched from cold and rage. He says, do not speak to Betty about the trials. You nod. I mean it? He snaps the devil uses the soft-hearted. And you strike me as someone easily led. You want to say something. You want to defend yourself, but you don't. Because people who speak up get remembered. And people who are remembered get questioned. That night you skip supper. You walk to the edge of the woods instead, just outside the village. There's no moon, only a wash of stars scattered across the dark sky like spilled flour. You breathe. You think about escape. Could you make it to Boston? Could you survive the journey? Would anyone there believe you weren't touched by this madness? Even far away, would Salem stick to your skin like smoke? You return home hours later, shivering. In the doorway, Betty is waiting. You smell like trees, she says. You don't reply. You walk past her. And you realize she never sleeps anymore. She just watches and maybe waits. The next day, a man is hanged. You don't see it, but you hear the bell. It tolls once, then again. A rhythm without music, a heartbeat without life. And even though you're in the backyard of the parsonage splitting kindling, the sound cuts through the frost and sinks straight into your spine. The man was a farmer, a quiet one. No history of mischief, no rumored dealings with strange herbs or nighttime rituals. Just a man. His only crime, they say, was that he didn't cry when accused, that he stood too still, that his silence was red as guilt. You wonder how many ways there are to be guilty now. You hear later that his wife fainted at the noose. She was accused the same morning he was hanged. No one helped her up. At dinner, Reverend Parris doesn't mention it. He talks of Scripture, of mercy through discipline, of God testing the righteous. But no one is listening anymore, not even Betty. She picks at her food like it's made of dust. That night, as you sit near the hearth, Ezra knocks softly at the side door. He whispers, "Can you walk?" You nod and follow. He leads you to the edge of the woods where a group of 6 people stand in a loose circle. You recognize 2, a weaver and a shoemaker. The others are strangers, faces half lit by the weak lantern Ezra carries. We've been writing names, Ezra says. Not the accused, the accusers. We're tracking their patterns. One woman adds, some only name people with land near theirs. Convenient, isn't it? Another murmurs, others name those who owe them favors. or debts. A third older man says quietly, I think the court doesn't care. They just want confessions. You blink. This is dangerous. Just standing here, just listening, could be enough for someone to say you consorted with dissenters. But you don't move, you just listen. A list is passed to you. There are red dots next to some names. What do the dots mean, you whisper? Confirmed patterns, Ezra replies. People gaining property after the trials, or moving into homes of the jailed. You stare at the parchment. This isn't just fear anymore. It's math, numbers, motives, real estate. Historians still argue whether greed drove the intensity of the trials. Some claim puritanical zeal was the fuel. Others see land disputes, inheritance arguments, and personal vendettas as the true accelerants. One letter from a nearby village describes how accusations often followed arguments over livestock. Another mentions two sisters who accused their own aunt over a will. It wasn't just hysteria, it was calculus. You return home that night with the list hidden in your sleeve. Your fingers tremble. You're not cold. You're terrified. Betty watches you from the stairwell. You don't speak. She smiles, not with her mouth, with her eyes, like she knows what you're hiding. The next morning you burn the list, not because you've abandoned them, but because you know paper can speak louder than truth. If someone finds it, you won't have time to explain margins or motivations. Fire eats secrets, and Salem loves ashes. The days grow shorter. Your work stretches longer. You chop wood until your palms blister again. You sweep until the straw brushes are bald. You do everything quietly, because noise draws attention, because movement is remembered. One afternoon you go with Reverend Paris to the courthouse. He asks you to carry a stack of letters, testimonies, signed confessions, lists of names. Your heart stutters at every one. Inside, the mood is electric. Men in dark coats whisper. One judge slams his gavel and demands silence. Girls stand in a row, trembling, eyes wide, muttering prayers. You spot Abigail among them. Her eyes dart to you. You drop your gaze. Then she screams. You flinch. She points, but not at you, at someone behind you. The room erupts. The accused cries, I never saw her. I never did harm. But the crowd isn't listening. A woman faints. A child begins to sob. You press your back against the far wall and wish you were invisible. When it's over, 2 more names are added to the condemned. 1 man, 1 woman. You never learn what either of them did or didn't do. Back at home, you scrub your hands raw. You swear you can still feel the letters on your skin. That night, Betty sings again. It's tuneless and low and full of wrong notes. You stare into the hearth, trying not to listen. But it's impossible, because you're starting to believe the real curse of Salem isn't demons or witches. It's the sound of people pretending they don't see what's happening. It's how silence is rewarded, and how screams are believed. You wake up before dawn to the sound of snow. Not a storm, just the quiet sift of flurries against the window pane, like someone pouring flour from a height. It's peaceful, almost soothing, and for a moment you forget where you are, who you are, what's unfolding around you, like a cold, wet shroud. Then the knock comes, 3 sharp raps on the door. You freeze halfway through tying your boots. Reverend Paris storms down the stairs in his nightshirt, opening the door before the 3rd knock finishes echoing. A constable, 2 arrests. He names them Giles Corey and his wife, Martha. You blink. You met them once. They shared roasted squash at a harvest meal. Giles is old gruff, a bit stubborn, but honest, tougher than the boots on your feet. His wife, gentle bookish. Her worst crime, you suspect, was reading in public. She's been using books, the constable says, as if announcing a sin carved into stone. Reverend Paris nods grimly. Later, you hear him mutter, "I warned him not to argue about land boundaries. That pride will undo them all. Land, always land." You begin to understand something dark and practical is feeding this fire. You walk to town after chores, trailing behind a group heading toward the courthouse. You know you shouldn't, but something inside you won't stay home. Maybe it's curiosity, maybe it's guilt, or maybe you just want to know how long until your name finds its way onto someone's breath. The courthouse is packed. Steam rises from bodies packed close together. Breath fogs the air. The smell of wool, smoke, and fear. Inside, a girl is speaking. She weeps, points to an invisible bird, says it pecked her shoulder, while Goody Corey watched, smiling. Someone faints again. It's always a woman, always near the front. The judge calls for silence, then a shout from the back. Spectre. She's flying above us. People look up. At nothing, but the panic is real. One man trips in the rush to kneel. Someone else begins to speak in tongues badly. He's never read scripture, but right now that doesn't seem to matter. The court calls it proof. You call it theater. Historians still argue over how much of the panic was performance. Some suspect the girls were coached or at least egged on by the adults. Others believe they were caught in their own delusion so deep they truly believed what they saw. Still others point to the power of suggestion, how once hysteria takes hold, the line between imagination and reality becomes terrifyingly thin. And in Salem, that line has all but vanished. You catch a glimpse of Giles Corey as he's led out. He says nothing, doesn't even look at the crowd, just stares straight ahead like a man walking through fire and daring it to burn him. That night, Ezra finds you again, this time in the barn where you're spreading hay. They'll kill him, he says. Eventually, you pause. Giles, Ezra, nods. He won't confess, and without a confession, the court can't take his land. His sons can inherit it. You look up. He says it flatly, so they'll press him. You remember hearing the word before, pressing, not metaphorical. Stone by stone by stone, until the ribs crack, until the breath fails, until silence becomes final. You want to scream, but that too is dangerous now. Instead, you whisper, "Why are you telling me?" Ezra just looks at you, because you still care. And I think one day, someone will need to remember what really happened here. You shake your head. Remembering doesn't change anything. He leans closer. Maybe not now, but later, when they pretend this was righteous, you'll know it wasn't. You want to say you didn't ask for this, that you came here to work to earn enough for a better life, not to become someone's witness. But Ezra is already gone. The barn feels colder. Snow begins to fall again. Quiet, steady, like time erasing everything, one flake at a time. That night, Betty hums a lullaby you recognize from months ago. Your mother used to sing it. You've never sung it here. You turn slowly. She's staring at the ceiling. You ask quietly, "Where did you hear that?" She smiles. You said it once. In your sleep. You don't sleep that night. Instead, you sit by the fire and wonder what else she's heard. What secrets your unconscious mind has whispered in the dark. In the morning, you burn the rest of your letters from home, just in case. By midday, the snow stops. The roads are slushy. People travel more. News spreads faster. The latest more than 40 are now held in prison. The jails are overcrowded. The sheriff says they might move prisoners to barns or church basements, because why not turn every sacred space into a holding cell? The town is still pretending this is justice, but you see what it really is, a siege, and you're inside the walls. The smell of burning herbs wafts through the parsonage kitchen. You're stirring porridge slow and steady, while Betty drops crushed rosemary and wormwood into the fire with theatrical flair. She claims it wards off evil, that it keeps her safe, that the spirits can't whisper to her if the air is full of good plants. Reverend Paris doesn't object. He even encourages it. Anything that keeps the girl quiet and publicly holy is acceptable. If she were calmer, more controlled, perhaps the townspeople would stop calling his family cursed. You know better. Betty's playing a game. One she's been winning, and you're still on the board, unsure if you're a pawn or something worse. An example, that evening, Goody Nurse is arrested. The Goody Nurse. Rebecca, the midwife, the gentlewoman who's helped more villagers enter the world than you've met. She's the one who nursed Betty when she had fever, the one who prayed over your blistered hands, the one who brings dried lavender bundles to the sick. And now they say she's a witch. Your heart sinks. She sent her spirit to torment the girls, says one whisper. She floats when she walks, says another. Her butter never spoils, even in heat. Really? That's evidence now. Yes, it is. Historians still argue whether some of the arrests, especially Rebecca Nurse's, were breaking points for Salem's sanity. Here was a woman admired by all faithful, generous. Her accusation made some begin to question the trials, but not enough, not quickly. You see it in Ezra's face when he tells you. A new kind of sadness. Not surprise he's past that stage, but fatigue. the kind that sinks into bones and makes the world seem gray. He says they're not just picking off the odd ones anymore. You nod. They're picking off the beloved. Later that night, something stranger happens. A woman shows up at the parsonage doorstep with a lump of dark bread. She insists it's for Betty. She says it's made with rye and ashes and the hair of the afflicted girl. A cure, she claims. An old way. Reverend Paris is outraged. He accuses her of witchcraft on the spot. But Betty, she eats it, smiles, and then falls into fits. It happens too fast. She screams. Her arms twist, her eyes roll. She shouts names, more names. You hear them. You recognize one. Yours. The room goes still. The Reverend's face drains of color. He looks at you, jaw clenched, and mutters, "Go outside." Now, you obey. You sit on the back steps in the freezing dusk. You try not to panic. But your name was spoken out loud in that voice. Even the dogs heard it. You know what that means. Accusation. You stay there for an hour, maybe two. No one speaks to you. No one tells you what comes next. Eventually, the door creaks open. Reverend Paris steps out. He closes the door behind him gently. Betty is resting, he says, voice flat. She doesn't remember what she said, but you both know that doesn't matter. He looks at you for a long moment, then adds, "You should avoid her, and avoid town. Just work quietly. Be forgettable." You nod. Not because you agree, but because there's nothing else to do. You now understand how fragile your safety is. Not built on truth, not built on innocence, but on forgettability. If no one remembers you, no one can accuse you. So you vanish. You stop attending church. You ask to work alone. You start using the back paths between buildings. You become a shadow, a wisp. You become safe. For now. One afternoon, you watch a girl draw symbols in the mud behind the jail. She claims it's protection, that the devil can't cross triangles. You ask where she learned that. She says she dreamt it. You wonder how many new truths are being born here, stitched from fear and fiction. The jailers stop questioning. The girls start naming trees, birds. They say the air itself is cursed. One says a goat tried to speak to her in Latin. You laugh, out loud. Just once. Someone hears. It's Ezra. He chuckles too. You share a look. A small human moment amid the madness. Then you both look away. Because even laughter might be suspicious now. Later that week, you hear the story of the witch cake again. This time, you're part of it. Someone says you helped bake it. You didn't. But it doesn't matter. What matters is the story's believability, not its truth. You ask Ezra what to do. He says, deny it. But don't deny too hard. Defensiveness is also suspicious. You blink. He grins, but it's a tired grin. We live in a town where being too upset about being called a witch makes people think you probably are one. The logic eats its own tail. And you try not to scream. You try not to weep. You try not to be anything, because anything can be twisted into guilt. So, you breathe, you bake the bread, you sweep the floor, you lower your eyes, and you wait for someone else's name to rise above yours in the rumor smoke. You begin to count your steps, each morning from the attic to the hearth, from the hearth to the well, from the well to the back shed, and then to the chopping block. 37 steps. You know this now, because any control feels like survival. And when everything else is madness, rhythm is safety. But rhythm doesn't protect you from whispers, especially not the ones that start at church. It's Sunday. You sit in the very back on a creaky bench that leans slightly left. You don't sing. You barely breathe. Reverend Paris preaches of hellfire and wheat separated from chaff. You watch the room more than you listen, and you notice something strange. People are turning, not toward the pulpit, but toward you. A glance here, a nudge there. One girl giggles. Another clutches her chest like she's short of breath. Someone whispers your name, not loudly, just enough for the two women beside her to look your way. You feel your palms begin to sweat. Your stomach twists. You haven't spoken to any of them. You haven't even made eye contact in weeks. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that now in their minds, you're interesting again. You leave during the final hymn, ducking out a side door. You take the long way home, through the woods, past the stream. The cold air scratches your lungs, but you welcome it. At least trees don't accuse you. Back at the parsonage, you find Betty humming again. She's braiding string into loops, pretending they're charms. For protection, she says. You ask, from what she says, the girls. You pause, but you're one of them. She smiles. Exactly. You want to ask more. You don't. Instead, you go out back and split firewood until your muscles scream, because pain at least is honest. That night, Ezra knocks. Again, he carries a folded note. Don't read it here. You wait until you're alone in the loft. The note is short. You're being named again, more than once. Be ready, that's it. You burn it instantly. But it doesn't matter. The fear is already lit inside you. The next morning, a constable walks by the parsonage slowly, not stopping, not knocking, but looking. You know the routine now. The way they study you, the way they tally up your expression, your posture, your guiltiness, which now includes things like not crying enough when someone else is hanged, or crying too much, which could mean false sympathy. Historians still debate the precise psychology behind this, what turned ordinary villagers into suspicion machines. Some point to generational trauma, others to strict Puritan theology that linked suffering with sanctity. Still others suggest it was collective grief from previous plagues and wars, now given a new controllable shape, blame. Whatever it is, it's spreading like frostbite in bone. That week, someone leaves a dead bird on the parsonage steps. No note, just the bird. You bury it quickly. No one speaks of it. But later that day, Betty shrieks during prayer and shouts the black one. the bird spirit. It's still here. You don't flinch. You just stare at the fire and wait for the heat to burn through your skin and melt the cold coiling inside your gut. Then, an invitation, not from court, from the accused. A woman held in the jail passes word that she wishes to speak with you. She claims she knows your heart and has seen your name written in red smoke. You don't know if it's a threat or a plea, but you go. Inside the jail, it smells of sweat and sour meat. Straw clumps, shackles clink. She's older than you expected, hair graying at the roots, hands like branches. She says, they want your silence, but silence is a spell. It makes you invisible, yes, but it also makes you alone. You ask, what should I do? She says, speak truth, but only in places where truth is still allowed. You ask, where is that? She laughs softly, then says, nowhere. You return home and don't speak for 2 days. Betty begins to draw shapes on the walls with coal. You ask why. She shrugs. I'm tired of pretending I don't know things. You say, like what? She answers, like who's next? That stops you cold. You ask, is it me? She doesn't reply, but she doesn't deny it either. That night you sit on the roof, wrapped in an old blanket. You watch smoke rise from chimneys across Salem, tiny gray ghosts climbing into a cloudless sky. You count them. 1, 2, 5, 10. Each house a family, each family a story. Some of those stories are ending. Some will end tomorrow. You wonder what yours will be. The next morning, someone writes a name on the church door. It's yours, in ash. You don't move. You stand there staring at the ash letters. Your name smudged but legible, drawn in a shaking hand across the old wooden door. The wind tries to erase it, but not fast enough. You could wipe it off, but people have already seen it. They pass by slowly, pretending not to stare. Some offer tight-lipped nods. Others glance away as if proximity alone might doom them too. No one stops to ask if it's true, because it doesn't matter if it is. In Salem now, the accusation is the sentence. You walk away with numb feet and a firestorm inside your chest. Back at the parsonage, the kettle boils over. You let it. The steam scalds your hand when you reach for it, and you welcome the pain. Later, Reverend Paris returns from town with eyes like knives. He doesn't ask. He orders, stay inside today and tomorrow. Let things cool down, like bread on a rack, like a corpse. You nod. But in your mind, a door has opened. A new resolve begins to bloom. You've been quiet. You've been careful. You've been invisible, and it didn't save you. So now, maybe silence isn't safety anymore. Maybe it's just surrender. You think of Giles Corey, pressed, silent, crushed by stone. You remember Rebecca Nurse taken in shackles for her prayers. You remember the woman in jail who told you truth has nowhere left to live. She was right, but you still have breath. You begin to write letters, not accusations, accounts. You use scraps from Betty's drawing paper, dipped in ink. You dilute to stretch further. You record what you've seen, the names shouted, without evidence, the girl's inconsistent stories, the way Paris twisted fear into scripture. You do not sign the letters. You slip them into the pocket of Ezra's coat. When he visits, he reads them, slowly, then nods once. This is dangerous, he says, but it's good. He doesn't return them. You take that as a promise. The next morning you hear news that makes your knees buckle. Giles Corey is dead. Pressed. He refused to speak. Only 3 words before the end. More weight, please. That's all. Historians still debate whether he said those exact words. Some say it was apocryphal, a story crafted later to give the town a mythic martyr. Others believe it completely because even death couldn't force Giles to break. Either way, his silence speaks louder than any scream. You don't cry. You can't. It would feel like betrayal. Instead, you go into the woods and scream into a tree. Then you gather herbs, not because you believe in spells, but because you need something to do with your hands. Back home, Betty watches you crush mint and fennel into a poultice. She says, "You look like a witch." You reply, "And how would you know?" She smiles, "Because I've learned from the best." She's proud of herself, pleased to be a player in the game. You study her small fingers, her big eyes, the innocent cruelty of someone too young to grasp what her lies have done. You ask gently, "Do you know what it means? When they hang someone?" She shrugs. "They just stop being around." You say they stop being. They're gone. Forever. She blinks. But they come back. In dreams. Or as birds. You feel a cold pit open in your chest, not because she's wrong, but because she might be right in a way. Their memory does return, not as ghosts, but as guilt. That night, Ezra slips you a folded cloth. Inside a list. Names. Friends, he says. "We're sending these to Boston. There's talk of ministers who are against the trials. If we can get more people to speak out." You know what he's suggesting. A movement. Quiet. Dangerous. A whisper campaign against the thunder of courtrooms. You hesitate, then nod. You copy the names in careful script. You memorize the order. You burn the original. Days blur. A girl collapses in the street and names a cow as a devil. Someone accuses a doll of whispering scripture backward. Betty claims to be healed, then relapses when no one brings her honey cakes. It would be laughable if it weren't lethal. You think, this has to end soon. It must. But then someone says your name again. In public, at the well. Not whispered this time. Shouted, accusingly. People turn. One woman clutches her baby tighter. Another crosses herself. The baker's boy runs inside. And just like that, the tide turns. Against you. You're in your room when the knock comes. Not the soft kind used by friends. Not the polite kind used by strangers. This one is hard, sharp, final. It rattles the wooden frame like it knows something you don't. You walk to the door slowly every step, echoing inside your chest. You don't need to open it to know what's waiting on the other side. 2 constables. Their expressions are stiffer than their collars. Behind them stands the town clerk, holding a folded sheet of paper like it's a snake. By order of the magistrates, one says, "You're to come with us." You nod. No use fighting. That's for people with allies. You're a name on a list, a shadow with legs. And now you're walking into the storm. They don't bind your hands. Not yet. That's almost worse. As you leave, Betty watches you from the staircase. Her eyes are wide, unreadable. She doesn't cry, doesn't speak. Neither do you. Outside, the town has gathered. They always do. Salem doesn't need theater, it has trials. People line the path like it's a wedding, only colder. You hear murmurs. She seemed quiet. She never smiled right. She walked like someone with secrets. One man spits in the dirt near your shoes. No one offers you bread for the road. You arrive at the jail by dusk. It's smaller than you imagined, but heavier. The stone walls exhale cold. The iron bars have names carved into them, some recent, some faded. The guard leads you past 3 cells before stopping. This one. You step inside. The door closes. The lock turns with a sound that feels permanent. And just like that, you're no longer a neighbor. You're a prisoner. The air smells like straw and salt and panic. The walls are so close you feel like you've been swallowed by the earth. You sit on the floor. You wait. That's all you do now. Wait for sunrise. Wait for footsteps. Wait for someone to decide your life isn't worth keeping. The hours bleed. You hear a woman sobbing 2 cells over. Someone else recites scripture over and over, like it's a spell. A child, maybe 10 years old, sings a lullaby in a cracked voice. The guard brings food at dawn, a crust of bread, a ladle of water that smells faintly of mildew. He doesn't speak. You try to eat. You try to sleep. But mostly, you exist. That becomes your job, existing in the quiet, in the waiting, in the shrinking circle of your own body. Then comes the first visitor, a magistrate, not Hathorn, one of the newer ones, clean boots, soft hands. He leans forward, as if he's your friend. You've been named more than once, he says. You don't reply. He waits. Then we just want the truth. You ask, what truth? He smiles like a butcher, that you consorted with the devil. You don't laugh, though part of you wants to. Instead, you ask, do you believe that he says nothing? That's answer enough. He leaves. The next day, the girls are brought in. They sit in the courtroom while you stand in the box. They scream the moment you speak. One faints. Another scratches at her own face, shouting that you're doing it from across the room. It's all so absurd. and yet believed. Spectral evidence, they call it. Invisible forces, spirits, dreams. Historians still argue whether the judges truly believed the girls or whether they were swept up in the pageantry and politics of power. Either way, justice bent under the weight of performance. You're asked, do you confess to being a witch? You say no. They ask, do you see spirits? You say only yours. That gets murmurs. One judge frowns. Another writes something down. Back in your cell, you count the cracks in the wall. 18. You name each one after someone who once smiled at you in town. By day 4, you forget how long you've been here. By day 5, you forget what warmth felt like. Then Ezra. He appears just outside the bars, face-pale hands, shaking. I tried, he says. I wrote letters. I begged them. You ask, doesn't matter. Does it? He doesn't answer. But he passes you something through the bars. It's not food, not a key. It's a scrap of paper. It says, stay silent or lie. Either way, stay alive. You don't cry because crying feels like a luxury now. You simply fold the paper, tuck it into your sleeve, and whisper, I'm still here. Morning comes like a slap, not gentle, not warm. A pale, pitiless light leaks through the slats above your head, and you wonder if the sun even knows where it's shining. You've been summoned again, this time for trial, not just questioning. You're led in chains, not heavy ones, but loud. They rattle just enough to remind the crowd, you're dangerous. Or at least that's the story they want to tell. The meeting house is packed. People who never looked twice at you before now stare with open curiosity. They want a show. They want deliverance. They want something to point at and say, there, that's the evil. And right now, that's you. The judges enter robes stiff with authority. The clerk reads your name, slowly, like he's savoring it. And then the girls begin again. The fits, the shrieks, the pointing. You'd almost admire the commitment if it weren't so lethal. One girl claims she saw your ghost float into her window at midnight. Another swears you rode a black pig through her dreams. Someone says their cat won't eat since the day you walked by their house. It's all nonsense. But it works, because nonsense is louder than doubt. The court listens. The audience gasps. And you stand there mouth dry as ash, knowing none of this can be disproven. That's the worst part. It's not about proof. It's about fear. And fear makes its own rules. Then they bring out the evidence. A doll found near your old lodging. A pin stuck through its heart. You've never seen it before. But that's irrelevant. They call it poppet magic. They call it confirmation. You call it desperation. Because someone had to give them something, anything. Historians still debate who placed the doll and why. Some say it was a child playing. Others say it was planted by zealots, eager for validation. No one ever confessed to making it. You're asked again, do you confess to witchcraft? This time you hesitate, not because it's true, but because you've seen what happens to those who say no. They hang, no trial delays, no mercy, no letters from Boston, just rope and silence. But those who confess, they live. In prison, yes, but breathing, and suddenly, that sounds like a luxury. You glance at the girls. One of them meets your gaze and smiles, just a flicker, like she knows the ending, and you don't. You swallow hard. Your voice catches. You start again. I never meant harm. But if harm was done, I repent. It's not quite a confession, not quite denial. Something gray, something slippery. The court leans forward. A judge says, "We ask plainly, have you consorted with spirits?" You answer, "I have prayed for deliverance in the dark, perhaps too often." Another murmur from the gallery. One of the magistrates scribbles something. You wonder if he's drawing gallows. After what feels like hours, the court recesses. You're returned to your cell. Your cellmate is new, an old woman with knotted fingers and eyes like burnt paper. She says nothing for a while, just watches you. Then softly, "Did you confess?" You shrug. Something like that. She laughs, not unkindly, smart. You lie on the straw and stare at the ceiling. Later, when sleep comes, it brings a dream. You're running through Salem, but it's empty. Every door is open. Every hearth is cold. You pass gallows that drip ink instead of blood. And at the end of the path stands Betty. She holds a doll. Its face looks like yours. When you wake, you're shaking. You sit up, breathe in the filth, exhale your fear, and whisper, "I'm still here." The days stretch out like a sermon with no end, one that drones, repeats itself, and somehow still manages to feel threatening. You start to forget which day is which. If it weren't for the tiny window casting faint squares of light, you'd assume time had simply curled up and died somewhere outside your cell. The court hasn't called your name again. That should be a relief. But in Salem, silence isn't peace. It's purgatory. You've lived long enough to understand that when people stop saying your name, they're not letting you go. They're waiting. And you, stuck between breaths, learn to live in that waiting. You pass the hours listening. Jailhouse walls are thin, and voices spill through them like smoke. The woman, one cell over the one, who mutters to herself in rhyme, begins to recite names. Not scripture, names. The names of people she believes will be next. At first you think it's nonsense, but then one of her whispered names disappears the next day. Taken, just like that. It happens again and again. You stop thinking she's crazy. You try not to listen when she says yours. You stop marking the days with your fingernail on the wood. You've run out of space on the beam anyway. And truth be told, you're starting to forget how long you've been here. 3 weeks, 4, long enough that you know which guard drags his left foot and which one smells of onions. Long enough to know that hope is a shapeshifter. It looks different every day. Sometimes it wears the face of Ezra, but he hasn't visited in days. Maybe he can't. Maybe he's been warned. Or maybe, no, Don't think it. Don't start burying people in your head before you know for sure. That's how despair gets in, quietly, through little gaps in your imagination. Instead, you start writing again, not letters, there's no parchment, not petitions, there's no court left that listens. No, you write truth in slivers. You find a broken nail under the corner of a floorboard and start carving words into the wall. Not full sentences, just fragments, names, places, the little sharp-edged truths that no one else is saying. You don't even know who you're writing for anymore. Maybe a future cellmate, maybe a rat, maybe God. But you write them anyway. Then, one morning the door opens and a new prisoner is thrown into the cell. The thud of her body against the straw startles you. You sit up, eyes adjusting, and see she's barely more than a girl. 13, maybe. If that. Her wrists are red from the rope. Her face blotchy from tears and dust. She looks like a bird someone tried to drown. You offer her the stale crust of bread you've saved. She stares at it, then takes it with hands that shake. She eats like someone who hasn't had to be polite in days. You understand. When she finally speaks, her voice is a whisper, too cracked to be sharp. Sarah, she says. My name's Sarah. You nod. You're safe here. It's a lie. But what else can you offer? Later, she tells you her aunt was accused, a good woman, a woman who raised her after her mother died of the fever, a woman who prayed loudly in church and grew herbs in her garden, lemon balm, sage, and marjoram. She was kind, Sarah says, too kind. When they came for her, Sarah screamed. She pulled at their sleeves. She spit on their shoes. She told them it was all lies. Wrong move. That's the thing about Salem. Defend someone, and you inherit their noose. Sarah doesn't cry anymore. That part of her ran dry somewhere along the road. You sit together, huddled against the cold. You tell her stories, not happy ones, not fake ones, but strange ones. About the way the moon looks when it's barely risen. About the cat that used to visit your windowsill and leave feathers in its wake. She listens, and slowly something like life flickers behind her eyes. Then one night a commotion. Voices outside, loud, urgent. A name shouted clearly through the dark Governor Phipps. You blink. You sit up fast enough to make your head spin. He wasn't expected yet. Not for weeks. But here he is, and with him, a decree. The special court is dissolved. Spectral evidence no longer acceptable. Just like that, the weapon the accusers wielded has been taken from their hands. The invisible wounds they conjured now evaporate into the fog. The girls fall silent. Some look confused. Some look afraid. It's not just you who hears this. Everyone in the jailhouse does. You hear someone sob in the next room, not out of sorrow, relief. Sarah looks at you. What does that mean? It means you whisper they can't kill us with ghosts anymore. Historians still debate what turned the tide. Some say the rising stack of petitions from Boston's ministers finally made their mark. Others point to the darker theory that someone whispered the governor's own wife's name as a witch. Suddenly it wasn't abstract anymore. Suddenly justice had a price. But for you, it's something else. It's the first drop of hope you've felt that doesn't come with a hook. Not all is well, of course. No one's being released. You're still locked in a room that smells of mold and sweat. You're still eating like a rat, still sleeping with one eye open. But it's something. You dream that night. Not of gallows, not of burning, but of a field, open and green, with a breeze that smells like time. You are walking barefoot, and you are alone, not watched, not whispered about, just walking. When you wake, you're crying. Sarah is still asleep, curled against the wall like a fern. You reach out gently and move her hair from her eyes. Then you whisper to yourself, like you do every morning, "Now I'm still here." And this time you almost believe it. You expect freedom to arrive like a trumpet blast, with light fanfare and the loud creak of a cell door flung wide. It doesn't. Freedom, if you can even call it that, slips in like a stray breeze, almost embarrassed. It starts with whispers. Someone down the corridor says a name got crossed off the list. Another claims a neighbor was quietly let go after a magistrate fell ill. A third swears that one of the jailers pocketed a bribe and lost a confession. You learn quickly, Salem justice has never been about truth. It's about exhaustion, about momentum, and now the wheels are slowing. The guards are less sharp than before. Their voices don't echo quite so confidently down the stone hallway. One even nods at you once, like you're a person. Not a witch, not an omen, just a woman. Then, without warning, you're called. Not for another trial, not for sentencing, but for release. The words come so quietly you think they're a mistake. You ask the guard to repeat himself. "You're being let go," he says, then adds, like it's an afterthought, no explanation. You don't ask for one. You stand slowly. Your knees tremble from the weight of not dying. Sarah sits up beside you, panic lighting her face. "They're letting you out." You nod. She grips your wrist. "Will you come back?" You don't answer, because you don't know. Instead, you pull the nail from under the floorboard, the one you used to carve names. You hand it to her, right, you whisper, even if no one reads it. She nods, mouth tight, eyes big. You're escorted through the same halls that once swallowed you. Everything looks smaller now, less haunted. Or maybe it's you who's changed. Maybe survival scrapes some of the ghosts away. Outside, the air hits you like a slap and a kiss. Sunlight, real sunlight. You shield your eyes like a prisoner of war, because you are, in a way, just not from the kind of war that makes statues and medals. There's no one waiting for you. Ezra isn't there. Neither is Betty. Your name has become ash in most mouths. You are what people pretend to forget. But the sky is blue. You walk. Every step is awkward, like you've forgotten how legs work in the open. Salem hasn't changed much. The streets still wind like gossip. The houses still lean in close whispering rumors with their shutters. But people avert their eyes when you pass, not out of fear, but shame. A few months ago, they might have cheered to see you swing. Now they pretend you never existed. That's the thing about witch hunts, they always end in silence. You find yourself at the edge of town before realizing where your feet have taken you. The trees here are the same ones you passed the day you were arrested. You press a hand to the bark of one and feel something steady, alive. You sit down in the dirt. You breathe. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, you don't feel like a ghost wearing skin. You remember a time before all this, before whispers and poppets and false dreams, before the world shrank to a cell. You remember laughter, a real joke, the sound of apples thudding in a wooden bowl. You cling to that memory like a rope. Then, movement, a figure, approaching from the road. Ezra. Of course, it's Ezra. He looks thinner. His coat hangs loose at the shoulders, but his face crumples when he sees you, and he runs like someone who's forgotten how to walk. He doesn't speak when he reaches you. He just holds you, arms around your ribs, his face buried in your neck. The tremble in his chest tells you everything. He never stopped hoping, and you, well, you never stopped surviving. Later, you ask what happened, how the court unraveled, how the panic lost its teeth. He tells you the governor outlawed spectral evidence. The jails overflowed. The public turned. Even the judges couldn't keep pretending they had answers. Some of the accusers recanted. Some fled. Some vanished into the quiet they'd created. Historians still wonder why the hysteria burned out so suddenly. Some say the people finally woke up. Others argue it was fatigue. A town can only run on terror for so long before it gets thirsty for something else. Or maybe the devil wasn't real after all. That night, Ezra takes you to the river's edge. You wash. The mud and straw and fear slide off you like bark peeling from a tree. You catch your reflection. You look older, not in years, but in knowing. You ask, "What now?" He shrugs. "We go somewhere else." You nod. You don't need Salem anymore. Salem taught you how cruel people can be. But it also taught you that you can outlive them. You whisper to the water, to the air, to the trees, "I'm still here." And this time it doesn't feel like survival. It feels like a promise. The journey away from Salem is quiet. There's no dramatic farewell, no lingering glance over your shoulder. Just a cart with a crooked wheel, Ezra's worn boots beside yours, and the slow rhythm of hooves against earth. The road is rough and unpaved, winding through fields that seem wider now, more generous. The further you go, the less Salem seems like a place that ever wanted to remember you. Ezra doesn't talk much. He watches the horizon, jaw tense, brow creased. You understand. The trauma doesn't drain out just because the road does. It lingers in your bones like a cold that won't shake. You pass a milestone marker, one of those carved stones with barely legible letters. 20 miles out. Ezra finally speaks. I have cousins near Andover, he says. They raise sheep. No one talks much there. You nod. Sounds perfect. You fall into a silence that doesn't sting. It's not the silence of judgment or fear. It's the silence of two people learning how to breathe again. That night you stop at a small tavern on the outskirts of a village too small to be named. The innkeeper is a widow with kind eyes and a limp. She takes one look at you, your threadbare dress, your sunken cheeks, and doesn't ask questions. You can sleep in the hayloft, she says. No charge. Ezra offers to fix her broken shutter as thanks. You lie there, curled into the straw, listening to the wind whistle through the cracks. Somewhere below, the widow is humming. It's not a hymn, it's not Latin, it's just a tune. And it's the most human thing you've heard in months. You think of Sarah, of her tiny fingers clutching that nail. You hope she's still writing. You dream of the courtroom again, but this time it's empty. The benches are dust-covered. The judge's chair is broken. No one is screaming, and in the witness box sits you. But you're not afraid. You're just waiting. You wake up with the sun warming your face and straw stuck in your hair. You stretch a real stretch, not the cramped twitch you used to do in your cell. Ezra hands you a cup of warm cider. No words, just that small kindness. You drink. You walk. You don't ask how far Andover is. Distance doesn't scare you anymore. You survived Salem. Somewhere along the trail, Ezra tells you that a friend from Boston is collecting testimonies. He wants to write it all down. What happened, who it happened to. Make a record. Make sure people remember. Will you speak to him? Ezra asks. You don't answer right away. What would you say? That justice wore a mask and turned neighbor against neighbor. That girls pointed fingers and grown men nodded along. That a village nearly choked on its own terror and called it righteousness. Maybe. Or maybe you'd just say this. I was there. And I'm still here. Historians still debate the final death toll. 19 hanged. 1 crushed. Dozens imprisoned. Hundreds accused. But the numbers miss the truth. The real damage is quieter. It's the trust that never came back. The families that moved without goodbyes, the way children grew up whispering in corners. You arrive in Andover by late afternoon. It's smaller than Salem. Less churches, more trees. The sheep watch you without judgment. Ezra's cousins greet you like rain gentle expected needed. You're offered a room, a bed, sheets, clean sheets. That night you light a candle and hold it close to your face. The light flickers across your cheeks. your eyes, your scars. You look like yourself again, almost. You place the candle on the windowsill and whisper, not a prayer, not a curse, just a statement. They didn't break me. Then, as you lie down to sleep, something extraordinary happens. You don't dream of gallows. You don't dream of jails. You dream of planting something. A seed. It grows, not fast, not flashy, but steadily, like you. Morning greets you with birdsong real and careless, as if no one was ever accused of devil's work just for owning a sparrow. You lie still for a moment, listening to the wind rustling the birch leaves outside. The room smells of wood smoke and something faintly sweet stew, maybe, or the tail end of someone else's breakfast. You're not used to comfort. It almost feels suspicious. You rise your joints, protesting. The wooden floor creaks, but not ominously, just the way old floors do when they're holding weight they've held before. Familiar. Home-like. Downstairs, Ezra's already working. He's splitting logs behind the cottage with his sleeves rolled up and his hair matted to one side. He looks like someone trying to forget the last few months by sweating them out. You don't interrupt. Instead, you sit at the kitchen table with one of the cousins, a quiet woman named Ruth, who smells like lavender. She hands you a cup of something warm and smiles without speaking. You sip, and it scalds your tongue just a little, but you don't care. Later, Ruth asks, "What will you do now?" It's a simple question, the kind people ask out of habit. But for you, it's like trying to answer a riddle carved into the sky. You don't know. You spent so long being defined by accusation, by survival, by silence. Now that you're free, what does that make you? You try to sew, but your hands fumble. You try to read, but the words feel slippery. You try to pray, but the silence afterward feels too much like a courtroom, waiting for a verdict. So you walk. Each afternoon you wander a little farther, past the field, past the stream, into the woods. You learn the smells of different mosses, the way the air sharpens near certain trees. You find a stump where you can sit and let your thoughts unspool. And you write. Not on walls this time, on paper. Ruth gives you some rough yellowed, the kind used for grocery lists or pie recipes. But it'll do. You use a charcoal nub, and your handwriting is uneven at first, like it forgot how to behave. You write about Sarah, about the girl who counted names like stars, waiting for one to fall. You write about Tituba, the woman no one really understood, who spun tales and somehow became the first domino. You write about the guards, about the judge with the crooked spectacles, who always sniffed when nervous. You write about the way your stomach twisted every time someone said, "Confess," like it was a hymn. And you write about the silence, the aching, echoing silence of people who should have spoken, but didn't. Historians still puzzle over why some refused to confess, even if it meant death. Was it pride? Faith defiance? Maybe. Or maybe it was the only way to say, I am not what you want me to be. Ezra reads a few pages. He doesn't say much, just nods and hands them back like they're something fragile and valuable. You build a little ritual around your walks. Every Thursday you tuck a new page into a dry crack in the stump, leave it there overnight, then take it back and rewrite it the next day. No one told you to do that. It just feels right. One evening, you meet a girl in town, no older than Sarah. Her mother is buying fabric, and the girl stares at you like she's not sure whether you're real. You're the woman from Salem, she says, not with fear, but with awe. You nod. Did you see the devil? You almost laugh. Instead, you bend low and whisper, No, sweetheart. But I saw men pretending they weren't him. Her mother pulls her away, flustered, but the girl keeps glancing back. You wonder what kind of stories they're telling now, and whether the stories you're writing will ever drown them out. That night, Ezra says, we could go further, south, west, wherever. You shake your head. No, let's stay. He doesn't ask why, but if he did, you'd tell him, you need to stand still for a while. Let the fear bleed out. Let your name become just a name again, not a warning. You're not healed, not yet. Some nights you still wake up sweating, certain someone is pointing at you. Some days you still catch your reflection and flinch. But you're here. You keep writing. And now, other women come. Not many. One at first, then two. Quiet knock at the door shawl. Pulled tight voice, barely louder than wind. They sit with you in the back garden. They talk. And you listen. You don't fix them. You don't quote scripture or offer remedies. You just listen. And sometimes you write down what they say if they let you. One of them asks, Do you believe in witches? You look at her for a long time. Then you say, I believe in women, and I believe in fear. And I've seen what happens when the second one wins. She nods. That's all she needs. In another world, you might have become a preacher or a healer or just a quiet woman with herbs on her windowsill. But in this one, you're something else. You're a witness. And sometimes that's enough. One morning, a letter arrives. It's sealed with wax rough around the edges, like it was folded in haste. Ezra finds it on the doorstep before sunrise wedged between a boot scrape and a stray feather. No signature, just your name, written in a hand you don't recognize. You open it slowly. Inside a few lines scrawled in charcoal, still here, still writing. The nail broke, but I kept going. S, you don't cry. Not really, but something in your chest loosens. Sarah is alive. Still locked away, perhaps. Or maybe out. You don't know. But she remembers. And she's writing. It's enough. Later that day, you walk into town. A new shipment of paper has arrived at the general store, and you want the thick kind, the kind that doesn't tear when your charcoal goes heavy. The shopkeeper greets you with a nod. He doesn't ask questions anymore. You're just the woman who buys too much paper and talks to herself by the river. It's an upgrade, really. As you leave the store, a boy runs past, almost colliding with you. He stops short, staring up at you with wide eyes. Are you the witch? His voice isn't cruel, just curious. You crouch slightly, meet him eye level. No, you say softly. But I met one once. His eyebrows shoot up. Really? You nod. She wore a black robe and pointed at people. Said their dreams were evil. Told them their tears weren't proof. He blinks. That's not what witches do. Exactly, you whisper. He runs off, probably to misquote you to half the village. But you smile anyway. Back at the cottage, Ezra is mending a fence. You join him, and together you work in silence. Your hands blister. The sun warms your shoulders. The rhythm of labor grounds you. Later, you bring out a page of writing and read aloud. It's not your story this time. It's someone else's. Ruth, maybe. Or the widow who lent you the hayloft that night. A quiet man with a stammer who once gave you bread and said nothing at all. Their stories matter too. The narrative weaves between yours like vines across an old wall. Somewhere along the way, people begin asking for copies. You don't have a press. You write by hand. 1, then 2, then 5. You start binding them with bits of twine, wrapping them in cloth, sending them off with Ezra when he travels to nearby villages. The pages travel further than you do. One day, a man with ink-stained fingers knocks on your door. He's heard of you, he says. He runs a small printing press, wants to publish the pages. You hesitate. Will they read it, you ask? He shrugs. Some will, some won't, but it'll exist. You agree, not because you want to be known, but because stories deserve witnesses. Weeks later, the first copy returns, bound printed, imperfect. Your name isn't on the cover. You don't want it there. The title is Simple Whispers from Salem. Ezra reads it cover to cover, twice. When he finishes, he says nothing for a long time. Then he looks up and says, I'm proud of you. You want to laugh or cry or both. Because after everything, you are proud too. Historians still debate how the Salem trials ended, whether it was mercy or shame or fatigue that brought the gallows to a halt. But none of them can tell what came after. The silence, the forgetting, the stubborn hope. You walk back to your tree stump one last time that season. The moss has thickened. A spider has spun a web across the hollow where you used to tuck your pages. You don't disturb it. Instead, you sit beside it and begin a new letter. To whoever finds this, you write. I want you to know it wasn't madness. It wasn't hysteria. It was fear, dressed up like justice. You write about firewood, about freckles, about the smell of rust in a jail cell, about what it feels like when someone believes you. Then you sign it not with your name, but with a mark, a small charcoal crescent, the same mark Sarah used once in the corner of a folded note. You place it beneath the stump and walk away. A storm is coming, you can feel it in your bones, but you're not afraid. You've weathered worse. You're still here. The seasons turn slowly, like a book being closed by an unseen hand. Autumn arrives with crisp mornings and the scent of burnt leaves. The village shifts. Color green fades to amber gold rust. You wake one morning to a frost-laced window and realize it's been nearly a year since you last saw the inside of a cell. Strange how time heals nothing directly, yet blunts the edges. You still flinch when you hear shouts, still startle at sudden knocks, still dream of ropes, though now they're untied. But you've grown into this new life the way ivy grows along stone, quietly, stubbornly, without permission. Your little cottage is no longer just a borrowed space. You've carved yourself into it, mended beams, tended a herb garden, painted a cracked windowsill with a color so defiantly cheerful that Ruth laughed for a full minute when she saw it. People stop by now, not out of curiosity, but trust. They bring bread, mended boots, gossip. They call you by your first name, not witch, not her, not the one who, just you. One afternoon you find a parcel wrapped in brown cloth on your doorstep, inside a book. One you didn't write. It's from Boston. Someone's collected stories from the trials, testimonies, letters, rumors. Your name is mentioned briefly in a footnote. You're oddly relieved. Too much fame feels like standing in a circle again. Later that night you read the entry aloud to Ezra. He listens, then shrugs. Let them write what they want, he says. We know the truth. You smile. Do we? Ezra chuckles. Enough of it. Historians still argue what the trials taught America. Some say it was a lesson in judicial overreach. Others claim it hardened Puritan resolve. But the real lesson was quieter people will trade anything, faith, logic, even kin, for the illusion of safety. And yet, they can also rebuild. You start hosting readings every third Sunday. Not sermons, not lectures, just stories. You invite anyone who wants to share women servants, former jailers, a wandering preacher who once saw the devil in a cloud formation and now sees him mostly in tax collectors. People come. They sit on blankets and stumps and overturned crates. Some bring wine. Others, their silence. You speak about fear, about the smell of damp wool in the courthouse, about Sarah's chalky hands, about the hollow ache when you realize the town you loved never loved you back. You don't speak as a victim. You speak as a witness. A girl from Salem stands to read. She's barely 20. Her voice shakes. She tells a story of her mother, accused, but not taken. How they fled before the fingers pointed. When she finishes, you applaud first. Then everyone follows. That night, as the fire crackles low, Ezra says, I didn't think we'd come this far. You don't answer right away. You're watching the flames. I didn't think we'd come out at all, you say finally. The truth hangs there, unashamed, unvarnished. And then you laugh, a real laugh, loud, messy. Ezra joins you. Because What else is left once you've crawled through fire and found your voice still intact? You write again. This time not in secret, not as therapy, but as offering. A collection of stories, yours and others. Fractured, tangled, resilient. You call it Ashes and Thorns. The printer agrees to make 20 copies. They sell out in 2 days. People write back. Some send letters. Others send gifts. A carved spoon, dried herbs. A painted rock shaped like a bird. One girl sends a lock of her hair and a note. My sister almost died because of a lie. Thank you for telling the truth. You keep every letter. Ezra builds a small chest to hold them. On the lid, he carves, "Still here." You don't lock it. One evening, as the stars dust the sky like spilled salt, you walk to the stump again. You find something there. A folded page. Charcoal ink. They let me go. Still afraid. Still writing. Maybe we'll meet again. No name. No mark, but you know. You sit beside the stump and cry. Not from grief. Not from fear. But from the fragile, stupid, glorious hope that somewhere Sarah is reading your words too, and that the story, your story, is no longer a warning or a whisper. It's a fire, burning softly. The winter comes not with a howl, but with a hush. Snow falls like spilled flour, blanketing the world in stillness. The air turns thin sharp, like it's been honed on grief and carried by memory. You wake each morning to the creak of the roof under frost and the delicate crackle of ice tracing the corners of the window pane. You don't hate it. It forces everything to slow, forces you to sit, think, remember. The readings have paused for the season. No one wants to trek through knee-deep snow just to cry on a blanket in your backyard. But that's all right. The stillness has its own rhythm now. You use the time to write more. You set up a corner in the loft. Old candle stubs, worn paper, a chair that creaks when you shift your weight. Ezra calls it your tower, as if you're some kind of monk transcribing forgotten gospels. He isn't far off. You're not just writing stories now. You're asking questions, dangerous ones. How did we get so afraid? Why were we willing to destroy our neighbors for a little comfort? And what does it mean to forgive people who never asked for it? You don't always have answers, but you've learned to live inside the question. One night, Ezra asks if you'll ever return to Salem. The question hangs there, a breath you're not sure you want to take. You stare at the fire for a long time. The logs spit and pop as if resisting the idea themselves. I don't know, you finally say. Because how do you go back to a place that once dreamed you dead? Historians still debate how Salem moved on. The trials ended, yes, but did the fear ever leave? Or did it just change its mask? Maybe it became gossip, or shame, or the tightening of laws around what women could wear, say be. You've seen it before. The embers never die. They just wait for dry kindling. But here in this cold and quiet cottage, you feel warmth, safety. You've become something like a stone wall, weathered, unmoved by wind, still standing. People continue to write you. A woman from Maine who says her aunt disappeared one night in 1692. A boy from Plymouth whose mother still won't speak of that year. A former constable who sends you a single word, sorry. You never respond. But you read each one twice, sometimes aloud, sometimes just in your head. You've started teaching a few children to read. Ruth suggested it one afternoon, and you thought she was joking. You're not exactly known for your maternal warmth, but somehow it works. The children like your stories. They laugh when you describe the preacher who once exorcised a goose. They gasp when you tell them about the cellar in the old jail where rats had names and personalities. One of them asks, "Why do you remember all this?" And you answer without thinking, "Because if I don't, they'll get away with it." That's the truth, isn't it? Memory isn't just about the past. It's a kind of shield, a protest, a lantern in fog. You teach the children to question everything. Why did the judge believe girls who saw ghosts? Why did the town punish herbs and hymns, but not greed or silence? You don't give them answers. You give them questions with sharp teeth. And they love it. One girl, Clara, says she wants to be a writer like you. You tell her not to. You tell her to be better. She writes anyway. Sometimes you catch Ezra watching you through the window while you read to the children. He doesn't interrupt, just smiles like a man watching spring bloom through snow. One morning, a new letter arrives. It's not signed. It simply says, "They're asking questions in Salem." Some of them even want to build a memorial. Can you believe it? Stone and names. As if that's enough. You hold the letter in your hand a long time. No return address. No initials. But the charcoal smudge in the corner tells you everything you need. Sarah is still writing. And maybe Salem is too. You don't know what a memorial will fix, or if it should fix anything. But the idea of it, a stone with your name carved not as an accusation, but a memory that's something. You don't cry, not now. You fold the letter, slide it into your chest of keepsakes, and return to the children waiting on your porch. Clara holds up her newest story. It's titled, "The Girl Who Never Burned." You grin and say, "Read it loud so the ghosts can hear you." And she does. Every word. Spring doesn't arrive so much as it sneaks in. One morning, the frost is gone, and the ground is soft beneath your boots. Shoots of green push through the thawed earth, like shy children, peeking from behind doorways. You feel it in your chest before you see it in the way your breath no longer steams, in the way the air smells more like dirt than smoke. You start walking again, longer paths, deeper into the woods, not to hide, just to remember how it feels to move freely. You follow deer tracks once, just for the pleasure of not knowing where they lead. You find a frozen stream, halfway melted the ice, breaking apart in beautiful fractures, like old pain finally giving up. Ezra joins you sometimes. He doesn't say much, and that's the best part. The silence between you is soft, now not brittle, shared, lived in, You bring a notebook, not the old charcoal-smeared pages, but real paper now, ink bound with twine. You write stories the way someone mends fabric, threading the torn parts together, carefully, patiently, with hands that understand pain. One of the stories is about a girl who turned invisible because no one believed her. Another is about a man who planted apple trees after he lost his voice and waited 20 years before anyone tasted the fruit. You read them aloud to the wind, not for anyone else, just for the trees. Word spreads that you're teaching again. A young woman shows up with her toddler on her hip and asks if you can help her learn to sign her name. You take her hand, guide the pen, and whisper, "You don't need permission to exist." She writes her name 6 times, laughs when it finally looks right. Historians still debate how Salem's legacy lives on, whether it's in the books, the museums, the warnings carved into granite. But you think maybe the real legacy is this women learning to write their names without shaking. The children return for your readings. Clara has brought her little brother now. He doesn't understand half of what you say, but he giggles when you do. The voice of the grumpy constable who was afraid of cats. You oblige, of course. Grumble and all. One day Ezra brings home something odd, a lantern made of colored glass, red, green, and a shard of cobalt blue that glints whenever it catches the sun just right. He says it reminded him of you. Bright and cracked, you ask. He smirks. Hard to look away from. You hang it outside the front door. At dusk, the light flickers through the glass like a kaleidoscope casting colored stars onto the path. Travelers begin stopping by just to see it. They call your place the house with the strange light. Fitting. Your life has become a patchwork of such strange lights. Letters from strangers. Laughter in the garden. Ghost stories told by children who've never seen a ghost, but feel their echoes in the wind. And Sarah. Always Sarah. You've stopped waiting for her letters, but they still arrive. Some are barely legible. Some are just drawings. Stars. Hands. Flowers. One is just a feather. And the words, still breathing. You keep them all. One night as the lantern swings gently in the breeze, Ezra says we should go back. You know what he means. Salem. It's not a suggestion. Not really. Just a possibility being held up to the light. You don't answer. Not right away. Because there's something deep in you that still recoils, that still sees gallows when you close your eyes too long. But there's also something else now. Strength. A kind of bone-deep steadiness that wasn't there before. If I go, you finally say I won't be quiet. Ezra nods. Good. You don't make plans. You don't rush. But you start writing something new. Not a story, not a warning, a letter. Addressed simply to the town that buried me and left the shovel. You write about the girls, the judges, the rope, the screams, but also about the silence that came after. The soft rebuilding, the stolen hope returned like a found button, a whole world sewn back around it. You end with, I forgave you before you asked, but not because You deserved it, because I did. You fold it neatly, tie it with twine, and place it on the shelf beside Sarah's letters. The lantern glows, the trees sway, and somewhere in the distance you hear laughter that sounds like freedom. You return in the spring of your own choosing. No procession, no dramatic wind rustling your cloak like in one of Clara's stories. Just a cart, a packed satchel, and Ezra's hand steady on the reins. Salem doesn't rise out of the earth. It peeks over a hill reluctantly, like it's afraid to see you again. You wonder if it will recognize you. You certainly don't recognize it. The trees are taller. Some houses have crumbled and been rebuilt. The meeting house has a fresh coat of paint, too white to feel honest. Children run across the green without looking over their shoulders. That alone feels like a kind of miracle. You walk slowly. Your boots crunch on gravel paths you once sprinted across in fear. A few villagers stare. Most don't. Maybe they've forgotten. Maybe they've remembered too much. You stand before the place they call the memorial now. It's small. A ring of stones with names carved in them. Dates. A bench. You scan the names. Yours isn't there. You knew it wouldn't be. But you find Sarah's. Tucked between Anne and Rebecca, you place a single white flower beneath it. No one watches. No one applauds. The world doesn't shift. But your knees feel a little stronger when you stand back up. You visit the old jail next, or where it used to be. There's a bakery now. People line up for sweet rolls. You let that absurdity settle in your chest. Ezra buys a loaf. You sit together on the bench across the street and eat in silence, as if this were any normal morning in any normal town. You wipe crumbs from your lap and wonder if the stone beneath your feet remembers the weight of chains. Historians still argue if the apologies were sincere. In 1706, one of the girls, Anne Putnam, stood before the congregation and said she was sorry, that the devil had tricked her, that she hadn't known better. But she never named the people she hurt, and no one asked her to. You think of the children you teach, of Clara's bright eyes, of her brother's stories about cats who arrest witches instead of accusing them. You wonder what they would say if they stood here. You walk the rest of the village alone. Ezra gives you space. You pass your old home. The shutters are green now. There's a new fence. You don't stop. You don't need to. What you came to bury is already dead. What you came to keep lives elsewhere. You return to the memorial one last time. This time you pull the letter from your satchel, the one tied with twine. You don't read it aloud. You just place it at the base of the stone. A soft breeze lifts a corner as if Sarah herself is nodding. The sun begins to dip. You feel it on your face, warm but not burning. When you and Ezra leave, you don't look back, not out of pride, but peace. Because the ghosts are quieter now, because your name no longer fits in anyone's mouth unless you choose it. Because survival is a language and you've become fluent. You arrive home after dark. The lantern is still swinging. The garden is blooming. The chest of letters waits like a patient friend. You climb into bed, not exhausted, not afraid, just full. You whisper goodnight to the room, to Sarah, to Salem, to the silence that no longer swallows you. Then slowly, gently, the world begins to fade. And now, everything softens. The colors of the day retreat behind closed eyes. The air becomes still, wrapping you like a quilt woven from old stories and new beginnings. You're safe now. No gallows, no whispers, no more trials. Just the quiet rhythm of breath, steady and true, echoing the gentle truth that you made it through. Every storm, every silence, every moment when it would have been easier to disappear than to speak. You survived. Let that settle in your chest, warm and calm. You survived, and what's more, you turned memory into meaning, pain into paper, fear into firelight. You gave the ghosts names, gave their stories endings, and gave yourself permission to rest. Let the stillness wrap around you now. The house is quiet. The lamp flickers low. Outside, the night listens with care. Even the stars blink slower here, as if waiting for you to let go of the day. And you can. Because everything you carried found its place. There is nothing left to fight tonight. No names to clear, no words to rewrite. Only this peace, only this breath. So sink a little deeper now. Let the memory of warmth settle behind your eyes. Let the air grow heavy with quiet. Let the night hold you the way no one did back then. And as sleep begins to carry you away gently, patiently, know this. Your story mattered. Your voice remains. And tomorrow will wait, sweet dreams,